Hi, what's going on? This is Eric with another video. So I wanted to talk today about when you are putting yourself out there, creating value in the world, and sharing yourself. So, there are so many people where they are afraid to speak up, they're afraid to talk about what they're doing, and it usually comes from something that, happened in their past. It might be, you were 7 years old, in school, or, you raise your hand, you have the wrong answer, and people laugh at you, and you go, okay, cool, I'm never going to speak out again. Or it could be that you're sharing some project, you get some criticism, you have someone say something negative to you, and you go, oh, I guess, I want people to like me, so I'm not going to share that again. A good example of that is there's these investment message boards that I'm part of, and in general, the investment community, the value investment community, is a really, really incredibly amazing community, really supportive. I would not be where I am today, quite frankly, if it wasn't for growing up inside that community. I went to my first Berkshire Hathaway meeting when I was 18, and I started blogging when I was maybe 16 or 17. There was a guy named Shai Dardashti who had a blog back then, and just really generous with his time, really out to help people. And here I was at 16, 17 years old, and he would talk to me, and I interned for him one summer, and just a really, really generous guy. And that's been 99% of my experience, are people that are really generous with their time, and it's made me want to give back. And I love helping people who are getting into the industry, and it's not easy. There's not many avenues, to say, okay, I want to start a fund, or I want to manage money. Usually the only avenues to go to are, work as an analyst or for a bank for many, many years to go out on your own, or if you already have, connections where you can manage a pool of capital. So, in general, amazing community. That being said, like any communities, there's always, the negative voices are always the loudest, if you will. And in the investment world, it's probably a little accentuated. My dad, he is the chairman of pediatrics and literally runs an entire children's hospital out in New York. So he's responsible for a lot of people, and he's part of a pretty big industry. Now, my dad is sharing things all the time. He gets published in journals. He's sharing things on Twitter. And nobody is attacking him for that. I've had conversations with him about this. You put your stuff out there in the medical community, people share their research, they like to expand on their knowledge. It's very cool. In the investment community, though, you have this, again, it's a small minority of people, but generally people who have sort of the emotional intelligence of a 12-year-old, and clearly they hide behind their intellect and their logic systems and books. So, they can recite to you every mental model, but, they're, I don't know how to say this without being an asshole, but they're kind of losers in life. They're, not very social, very disconnected. And, for all they could be a 12-year-old, as a keyboard warrior behind their computer living in their mom's basement. So, there's always going to be those people. But they tend to be, instead of actually being, supportive to the community, anything that's outside of their box of possibility, or if you're actually being successful and doing something really cool in the world and you're sharing what you're up to, they'll find a way to put you down. And it's a really interesting dynamic at play. I just had a situation where I shared a 2-hour podcast with a friend of mine, Scott Forgy, who's an amazing human being, friend. Always learn a lot when I'm around him. And this guy's been doing some really, really amazing transformational organizational development work for, I don't know, at least 30 years. And here's a guy, highly trained, has, amazing track record in business and working with people. So I was sharing a thing in a separate thread. I wasn't hijacking a thread or anything. In a separate thread, and I was saying, here's a really useful podcast that I did, and it's especially relevant for these times when companies are struggling, with all the stuff with COVID. And, a lot of the principles we talked about are even more relevant today than when we first did it. Now, there was no agenda other than sharing for the love of sharing, wanting to contribute to my community and, make a difference. And, there's some people who, they're not interested in anything other than analyzing companies, and that's fine. But there are some people that actually like to understand how moats work and understand how culture works and how people are related to each other, and, actually like to go into the nuances and are a bit more of a polymath like I am. And, for those kinds of people, that's a very interesting conversation. Well, within a very short time of me posting that, you're being super promotional, all of these insults, or I once worked at a real estate company and there was some dumb consultant and that was just an excuse for the management to waste money and go on trips or something like that. And it's like the fact that you're comparing someone who's doing like actual like organizational development and like real transformational coaching with like a stupid motivational consultant who's, a bullshit artist. It's not even an insulting, because clearly the person has no idea what the fuck they're talking about. But it's just sort of like a waste of humanity and quite frankly a waste of space, and just entirely unprofessional and quite frankly disgusting. And unfortunately, those are the 99% of people are not going to speak with that sort of low level emotional IQ or whatever you want to call it. But the people who are not that bright outside of their intellect, and again, for all I know, these people are like 12, 13-year-old kids in their fucking mom's basement just writing shit, because anyone could join a message board. And it's kind of unfortunate, because people look at that, there's lots of people who will take something like that personally, and they go, oh, well, I can't talk about this anymore, I can't talk about this in my community anymore. And that's really a shame. So one of the things that I always foster with the people in my life, whether it's my friends or my colleagues, most of them who I actually am friends with, is if people are up to something cool, I want to hear about it. And if I don't understand it, I want to learn about it. Doesn't mean that it has to be my thing or my passion, but I would never, God forbid, shoot someone down for sharing, something that they're passionate about and what they're up to. Now, look, if I was on an investment message board and I was saying, someone was posting about, Google, and then I said, hey, speaking of Google, I have this really amazing SEO product and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that would be obnoxious. And it would be inappropriate. And I would just be hijacking threats to sell people things. Or, if I was working for some, scammy MLM and trying to sell my product to everyone that I was connected to. But here I am, literally not selling anything, sharing a project, in this case, a podcast, where I'm not making any money off, I guess in full disclosure, I may be making like $1,000 a year off my listeners, but I guarantee you it's not going to change because I posted something on a message board. But I'm not making any money on that individual episode. I don't get paid for sharing that, just sharing for the love of sharing. And I've honestly connected with a lot of really great people through the various projects that I'm working on. But yeah, does not foster the community to be shutting people down because you're sharing a project. But it just really speaks to the resignation and cynicism of some people, that they would actually not only have the thought that it has some nefarious motive, but they would actually go out of their way to spend energy to put someone down, or have these, thinly veiled, really obvious attacks on someone's character because they're sharing a project they're up to. And yeah, it's pathetic. So I want people to know that if you are in any community, whether it's in the investment community or if it's in, any kind of community, that you don't start hindering yourself because you're afraid of someone, gonna judge you. And the truth is, there will always be people that judge you. I was just sharing about this on Facebook recently, but I used to be so nervous when I was younger. And I remember being a teenager and I'd have some really grand idea or really, thing that I really wanted to work on or accomplish. And, I would sort of tone it down because, I would come off as too abrasive or too this or too that or be too much for someone. And, the truth is that when I started toning myself down, the exact same people judged me anyway. So, people will always attack your tone or attack something or throw an ad hominem attack at you. But what you'd find is when you tone yourself down, it's not like they're magically going to like you. And what ends up happening instead is that you feel shitty about yourself because you're not actually expressing yourself fully and not sharing the fucking gifts that you have to give. So when you are just unapologetically sharing, and you're doing it for the love of sharing and for the love of making a difference and contributing, you can't fucking lose. And yeah, there will still be some people that get annoyed at you or get upset by you or you trigger something in them, and that's their fucking problem. So, keep creating, keep sharing. I encourage all of you to keep doing that. And just remember, the naysayers and the people who actually are so fucking obsessed with something you trigger inside them that they're going to go out of their way to attack you, those people are the minority. Most people who think you're up to something cool, they're not going to go out of their way to start, giving you praise and acknowledgement, so that's just kind of how it works. But people who have something nasty to say about you, they'll often go out of their way to say something nasty so they can be right about it. And, in the investment circles, the way they do it is use a bunch of intellect, and they hide behind that. So anyway, that's all I have to share. Keep being awesome, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.